the amount of need and the level of appreciation that these patients have, and frankly, the lack of access to quality care on a regular basis, there's just a very significant gap. And to be able to fill a little bit of it is really rewarding. I mean, the children who were like just so appreciative of what we were doing really was just, it was special.
All right, y'all. It's your host, Dr. Nee, joined by
Dr. Renee. Told you I was bringing the singing back.
Need to get some earplugs, but hey, we gonna let it roll. What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee, Dr. Renee here. Listen, we here for another episode of Docs Outside the Box. Let me start off by asking you, when you first started your Facebook account, did you ever think that you would start sharing it for medical reasons? Although possibly when you started it, were you in med school when you started?
No, I was in residency. I started my Facebook account when, 2000?
Oh, yeah, that's true. We were in residency when...
Yeah.
Were we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were in residency. I want to say either it was 2000... No, it had to have been 2007. The year after I graduated from med school was when I think I started my Facebook account, was 2007.
So I could definitely tell you when I started my social media, which basically was Facebook. I had no thoughts of like sharing anything related to medicine. This was just reconnecting with old friends, college buddies.
Yep, same here.
Things like that. And then the stakes kind of
changed.
I think every like 5 years there's been iterations of social media from that point. And 5 years grows fast when you're first starting out with something that's never been out there before. Yep. I think definitely by 2012, there were definitely like those social media influencers who were in the medicine world. It's small.
It was small back then, yeah.
And then by the time you have 2017, obviously like...
When the pandemic hit, forget it.
Yeah.
Right? Because now everything was shut down. And so people were like, okay, how do we get information out?
It's almost like nowadays, I think patients are almost expecting you to have some type of social media presence.
Whereas before, it was like, you're a doctor, why are you on social media? Yeah. And that was on both sides, too. You know, doctors would be
And I'm
like,
not talking about a website.
No,
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about
social
like
media.
I need to know if you on Instagram or if you on TikTok or YouTube. Because if you ain't,
then
right. Which is weird, right? Because it's like, well, it's just weird, right? Like the name of the game has kind of shifted to where, like you can't just have a website anymore. Actually, nobody's even checking websites anymore. It's really mainly about your social media content.
Yeah, it's about your social media content. Social media, what's funny about social media is that, like I said, when it first came out and doctors were starting to go on social media and talk about what they actually do in medicine, right? So I'm not just talking about they go in sharing with family things and things like that. But,
here are my kids.
Right, here are my kids.
I went on.
Yeah, no, when they were sharing like information, like truly medical information, there was backlash.
Yes.
There was backlash, not just from the general audience, but from the medical world in general. It was like, well, you're a doctor. Why are you on social media saying all of these things and doing all these things?
But some of those things were legit, though. Like, because not what you're saying, but I think there was some people who were sharing way too much. Though.
Yes. Well, if you remember, there was a resident, I think, who was either disciplined or even dismissed from a program because he or she, I can't remember, shared something from the OR. Some sort of anatomical part from the OR and shared it without the patient's permission.
Can't do that.
Yeah, without the patient's permission.
Can't do that.
Yeah, and that was very early on. But patients as well would be like, why are you on social media? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, and now, I mean, it's like you said, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a viable way to get new people to come into your practice.
Oh, yeah. Now people are using social media to bring people in the door.
It's a viable way to establish your legitimacy, particularly I think if you're a private practice or if you're in a specialty that requires you to kind of, what's the word, kind of distinguish yourself from somebody else who does what you do in town, or several other people who do what you do in town, right?
Yeah.
Like you have plastic surgeons and dermatologists who are putting their work,
literally
their portfolio on Instagram. Check out my work. Look what I do, right?
Exactly.
People are going
before and after.
We're going to the West Coast. Some people are going to Turkey now, you know, to get stuff, and you'll see what this person is putting out there to go. And you know, obviously in my realm, it's a little bit different because it's kind of like this is an emergency type standpoint, so you can't really plan for that. Nor I don't think you should, but that's my opinion on that. But you know, not everybody thinks that way. So
I mean, becoming a doctor is almost becoming a doctor on social media. You almost, depending on your following, can have celebrity status.
Yes, you can.
Right?
Yes, you can.
Like celebrity status, and I think we see that with quite a number of doctors.
I know that a lot of social media influencers who are very successful, they talk about the positives, but there are times when they're very open about the negatives with having or being considered a celebrity. And I'm very interested because I don't hear like these medical influencers who are like really superstar status. Like, what are some of the negatives? Yeah. You know, because I'm very interested to find out, like, are there any negatives, right? Like, is there any backlash from your coworkers? Is there any jealousy or resentment from your coworkers? Or, you know, like if you're in a private practice and people know that, hey, like you just kind of just doing this, you know, just to do this. And really your main gig is what we see on social media. Does that cause any type of issue? Right.
So
like
you're so focused on social media. Are you really focused on your practice?
Well, that could
kind
be
of thing.
Yes, people will say that, but ultimately it's, how can I be down and how can you be able to do this?
They just jealous.
And I can't figure this out, right? But there may be some old heads who truly feel that way also, right? Like, let's keep it real and stuff.
Right.
But that's something that's really interesting. There's also the aspect of that we don't share that maybe we could share a little bit more about is like the medical mission stuff that we do. Yeah. So this year we're going to be going to Ghana again and doing a medical mission where you'll do some OB just a little bit.
Maybe.
Yeah,
with
and
these
then
kids.
I'm doing general surgery, but, you know, we go with a medical mission group for the past, 10, 11 years. Yeah. And, there are times when you can share certain things about certain operations that you do or the outcomes that you get. But that's a tough balance, right? Because what do they call that? I think they call that
volunteerism. Oh, I forget.
They got a name for everything.
Yeah, they got a name for everything.
They got a name for everything.
Yeah.
I just learned about love bombing. And now you heard about, I think it's like, it's...
I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's some sort of porn, they call it.
Volunteer porn or something like that. But anyway, that is something that I think is very interesting because it's a great way to recruit. It's a great way to get people to come and kind of self-select out as like, if you want to participate in a mission, these are kind of the nitty-gritty that we go through on a daily basis and so forth. Are you down and so forth? So,
but you also don't want people exploiting the patients who are there by basically putting them on social media and going, look, isn't this cool? And it's like, someone's health status.
If that's what all you're presenting, like this is cool and stuff like that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like, someone's health status isn't cool or not cool. You know what I mean?
And then the other thing is like, are they necessarily going to say no? Right. Like, do they feel obligated to say yes? Because we talked about this in the previous episode. You holding it over their head. So
right.
Yeah. But either way, guys, that leads to this episode, this interview that I did with Dr. Jason Auerbach. He's also known as the Bloody Tooth Guy. He is an oral, I was going to say OMFS, but he is an oral maxillofacial surgeon, shortened down to OMFS. But he's a really good surgeon who has is a triple threat where he's kind of mastered the economics of being a private practice doc by having multiple clinics. And then he has a very large social media following as the Bloody Tooth Guy. And then he also does, some mentoring of, medical or dental students, of dental students. It's a very interesting conversation. Yeah. I don't think we've had someone who had quite as large of a following social media wise as him. But he's here to kind of talk about, or we're going to highlight in his episode, the discussions of how he was able to create a big following on social media and then how he parlays that with his medical mission work. And then also at the same time, how he is able to build a viable practice that way, as well as teach other dental students. So anything you want to say before we jump into it?
Oh, let's jump into it because I'm interested to see what he has said.
Alfred! Run the tape. I think that's going to be my new catch line.
Alfred, let's switch into your social media.
Sure.
When did all this start? And did you anticipate where you'd be at from where you started? Because you're one of the OGs, right?
I appreciate that.
There's, usually this is a young person's game, right?
That's
particularly
hurtful.
in medicine.
I'm just kidding.
Well, listen, I'm not a spring chicken also.
I'm playing.
And I'm one of the ones who will say, yeah, I suck at this.
Right.
So how did this start, and how did you continue to grow your social media following?
So I think a lot of it, like many things in my life, I was kind of at the right place at the right time. I started in February of 2015. I was sitting here in this office on that chair over there, and I was like, there's this person, Dr. Pimple Popper, on Instagram, and she pops pimples, and it's interesting, and she's got a fairly sizable audience, and maybe people care about seeing disgusting teeth as well. So I have a friend who has a daughter who had a broken elephant. An elephant was her little stuffed animal. She was like 5 at the time. And she called the animal Broken Tail Guy. And I thought that the sound of it made sense to my brain. Again, I'm a pretty creative person. So I took that and I said, a bloody tooth guy. And I just put pictures. If you look at my old school stuff in February of 15 and for subsequent months, it was just pictures of broken down bloody teeth. As it became more of a venue for artistic expression, I would take pictures of teeth posed in certain ways and stuff like that. And then video came on, and then stories came on. And Instagram at that time was looking for content providers. And so they were pushing my stuff out. And I've in my history, I've never paid for a follower or never did anything like that. It seemed inauthentic to me. And for the first handful of years, I was also no one knew who I was. So because no one knew who I was, because I didn't really know what it meant from a HIPAA perspective. I mean, I was just taking pictures of teeth.
That's a tough one. Yeah. That's a really tough one. Yeah.
I didn't even know. I didn't know what my competitors would use it against me. I had no clue how it was going to be received. But eventually, I became kind of known in my very narrow but deep vertical. I have, followers from all over the world, literally all over the world, mostly younger, surgically minded dentists, dental students, people now who are now finished OMFS training, who were in dental school or even in college at the time, South America, Middle East, Eastern Europe, Asia, all over the globe, who thankfully, give me a little bit of credit for their interest in what they're currently doing. And I still love it. It's actually, it blows my mind every day when I get like a, thank you so much. You've been an inspiration. I learned so much from you, blah, 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 whatever it is they say. I really it feeds my ego, but it also feeds my soul, because it's a positive thing.
But a lot of times when I'm speaking with the younger physicians, surgeons who are interested in creating, a social media following, but maybe they do what I do, which is trauma surgery, which is pretty gory. Nobody really wants to see social media content. Well, actually, people do, but it's a little bit different.
That's right.
You can't.
They won't show it anymore. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, you're right.
But
they'll block it off.
I mean, we have some pretty gory stuff. I mean, there's just exposed bone and blood all over the place, and Instagram has done a very good job. I think Instagram has done a bad job, but I think they've done a good job censoring the stuff. They've done a bad job in ascertaining who wants to see it versus who doesn't. So they just block it all. So I think that, trauma surgery in particular, of course, really anything where it's blood. Because they can't, frankly, I think it's a concept of the AI cannot differentiate between some sort of violent act and the surgical procedure.
Correct.
But if you're following Bloody Tooth Guy or at you, clearly I want to see what you're doing. Clearly I want to see some sort of, traumatic injury that's being repaired or attended to or whatever it is. But they won't hear from that. I mean,
but the point I was trying to say is that
I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. Come on, this is conversation. Don't even worry about that. Is exactly what you said, which is, I think you said it, the best way you described it is you have a large vertical.
Deep and narrow. Very
right.
Deep
so you're extremely niche, but you're still able to really triple, quadruple, what other folks are able to do, because you can really focus in on what you're really good at. and your people have come, right? Like they follow from all over the world to get your training. So, the folks who are out there saying, what I do is quote unquote, not sexy enough, or, it's very niche down. It's like, here's an example right here of someone who's doing something that is very niche, and you're doing very well with it.